All right, let's dive in. Jean-Paul Sartre. You know, the guy who really took the idea of freedom and like wrestled with it?
Hmm.
We're going deep into his book Being and Nothingness today.
Okay.
And it's like a guidebook to
Yeah.
these big existential questions,
Right.
How can we really be free
Yeah.
when it feels like the world's like always putting up all these limits on us?
That's the heart of Sartre's work. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like he was, a leader in existentialism
right.
and is all about confronting that head on.
So Sartre starts with this idea that
Right.
there are like two ways
Right.
things can exist.
Okay.
And he uses these terms being for itself and being in itself.
Right.
And it can sound super complicated,
Yeah.
but it's actually like
It
it's
is.
really fascinating when you start to think about it.
Yeah. So think of being in itself as like just stuff,
Okay.
like trees, rocks,
Hmm.
uh, even like coffee mugs,
Okay.
even our bodies in a way. They just exist.
Right.
Right.
But they don't have consciousness.
Okay.
No thoughts, no feelings, no, just pure being.
They just are.
Yeah, they just are.
But we're being for itself. Like we're conscious,
Right.
we're aware of ourselves, we have all these thoughts,
Yeah.
we make choices.
Exactly.
And that's where Sartre says freedom comes in.
Yeah, and so Sartre defines consciousness, this being for itself, by its ability to say no.
Okay.
And not like in a like a grumpy teenager, but
Right.
in the sense of recognizing that things could be different than they are.
Okay, so like when I'm trying to decide what to eat for dinner,
Yeah,
I'm saying no to
Yeah.
all the other options
exactly.
that I could have chosen.
Yes.
I'm acknowledging,
Yeah.
like, yeah, those things exist,
Right.
but I'm picking this one thing.
That's a great everyday example. But Sartre's talking about something way more fundamental.
Like this ability to imagine alternatives to negate what
Mm-hmm.
is the foundation of our freedom.
Mm.
It's like built into consciousness.
Okay, so this is where it gets kind of mind-bending.
Yeah.
He says freedom is connected to nothingness.
Mhm.
And before you think like, oh,
Right.
Sartre is just this like gloomy philosopher, hear me out.
It's not about emptiness or a lack of meaning.
Okay.
For Sartre, nothingness is the possibility
Hmm.
for things to be different than they are.
Okay.
It's like the open space
Mm.
where our choices can exist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So he uses this example, and it's so vivid.
Yeah.
Imagine you're at a cafe, you're waiting for a friend, but they never show up.
Hmm.
Now, their absence isn't just like a neutral fact.
Right. It's not just information.
Like it changes the whole vibe.
Yeah, totally.
Like you feel their absence as this, like almost
Mm.
as a presence.
Right. What's so interesting is that this absence,
Mm.
it's not just out there in the world.
Hmm.
It's something that we're creating in our minds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
We expect our friend to be there, and they're not being there is something that we experience.
So even nothingness, even something that is not existing,
Mhm.
is shaped by our awareness.
Exactly. And because we can imagine things being different,
Yeah.
we have the power to make choices,
Mm-hmm.
to change them. And that's the potential of freedom
Okay.
that Sartre's getting at.
But there's a catch.
Yeah.
Sartre also famously said we're condemned to be free.
Right.
And that just doesn't sound very freeing.
No, it doesn't. That phrase is one of the most powerful in existentialism, though.
Mm.
It captures the weight of responsibility
Okay.
that comes with radical freedom. Like we have to choose. We can't escape it.
Mm.
And every choice carries the weight of knowing that we could have chosen differently.
Right. Have you ever felt like
Yeah.
totally paralyzed by a big decision and you just wish someone would tell you what to do?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Choosing a career path or a place to live, or it can
Mhm.
be so overwhelming.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's part of the human experience.
Mhm.
And for Sartre, even choosing not to choose is still making a choice.
Hmm.
We can't avoid responsibility even if we try.
So what does Sartre say we should do with all this freedom?
Right.
Like, how do we even handle this condemnation?
Well, he puts a huge emphasis on action.
Yeah.
He says action is how freedom becomes real.
Hmm.
Even within like the limits of our situation.
Okay.
We're constantly making choices,
Right.
even if we don't always realize it.
So can you give me an example
Yeah.
of how something that seems passive
Mhm.
actually involves a choice?
Okay.
Imagine a hiker on a really tough trail.
Okay.
Like they're exhausted, they're pushing themselves to keep going,
Right.
and then they collapse.
Okay.
Sartre would say that even collapsing is a choice. So it's not just like giving into fatigue, it's an active decision
Exactly.
to stop, to rest.
Yeah. The hiker could have pushed further, even just like a couple more steps.
Right.
But in that moment, they chose to yield to their exhaustion.
Okay.
And that choice, however small, is an expression of their freedom.
Okay. This is making me think about like
Yeah.
all sorts of everyday choices in like a whole new way.
Yeah.
But what about when we try to avoid making a choice?
Right.
Like when we tell ourselves, oh, I don't have a say,
Yeah.
or we just kind of go with the flow.
You're talking about bad faith.
Okay.
That's another one of Sartre's big ideas.
Okay.
It's basically a way to deny our freedom by pretending that we're defined by these fixed roles or identities.
So like when someone says like, oh, I'm just the quiet type.
Yes. Perfect.
As a reason for not speaking up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or think about Sartre's classic waiter scenario. This waiter, he's super attentive,
Okay.
overly polite, almost like robotically performing the role.
Like he's trying to convince himself that he is a waiter.
Exactly.
And nothing more.
Precisely. He's avoiding the fact that he could choose
Right.
to be different, to act differently.
Right.
He's hiding from his freedom
Okay.
and the responsibility that
Right.
comes with it.
This feels so relevant today.
Totally.
Especially with social media, right? It's like we all play these roles online and present like these carefully curated versions of ourselves.
That's a great question.
Is that a form of bad faith?
It makes you wonder, are we being authentic online or are we performing for an audience? And if we're always performing,
Right.
are we truly free?
Whoa. Okay. That's a lot to think about. Sartre is like forcing us
Yeah.
to confront these like tough truths about ourselves.
He is. But he's also giving us a path
Yeah.
towards more authenticity and responsibility.
And that brings us to another fascinating part of Sartre's philosophy.
Yeah.
The look. This is about how being seen
Okay.
by other people
Right.
shapes our relationships.
This is where things get like even more intricate.
Okay.
Sartre argues that that our relationships are fundamentally impacted by the experience of becoming an object in another person's eyes.
His keyhole example is so intense.
Yeah.
Picture you're secretly watching someone through a keyhole. You're like completely absorbed in what they're doing.
Okay.
You feel almost invisible.
Right.
But then you hear footsteps approaching and suddenly you're flooded with shame.
Oh yeah. You're no longer the observer.
Right.
You're the one being observed, reduced to an object in their gaze.
It's that feeling of being caught doing something wrong,
Right.
even if you're not.
Exactly. Just the thought of being seen
Right.
triggers this shame and vulnerability.
That's the power of the look, according to Sartre.
Yes.
It exposes how much we depend on like other people's perceptions,
Right.
even if we don't want to admit it.
Yeah. We care about how we're seen,
Right.
and that shapes how we act, even who we believe ourselves to be.
So it's not just about feeling like judged. It's about how the look can actually like
Yeah, it can.
define us.
Exactly. And this leads to this fundamental tension in our relationships,
Okay.
which Sartre calls the struggle for recognition.
Okay.
And we'll dive into that more after a quick break.
All right. Sounds good.
So we were talking about the struggle for recognition.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're all subject to the look.
Okay.
We're constantly trying to manage how other people see us, often in a way that lines up with our own self-image.
Right.
But at the same time, we're also trying to define others with our own gaze. So it's this constant push and pull, this power dynamic that's always there
Right.
in our interactions.
I'm starting to see this everywhere now.
Yeah.
Like think about job interviews, first dates,
Yeah.
even like family dinners. It's like we're all trying to present this right version of ourselves, but also trying to figure out the other person at the same time. Have you ever felt that?
Oh,
Like, you're performing for someone's approval?
absolutely.
Yeah.
We all do it to some extent, whether we're aware of it or not.
Right.
It's fascinating how these like subtle power dynamics play out. And this ties back to bad faith, because when we're in bad faith, we're trying to escape the responsibility of being seen as this free agent. Right. We want to become an object in the eyes of others. Rather than the subject who's making these choices.
So it's like we're trying to blend in, become invisible.
Yeah.
So we don't have to deal with the weight.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. But the paradox is you can never truly escape the look. Even if you try to hide, you're still aware of being seen, even if it's just by yourself. That self-awareness is a constant reminder of your freedom.
It's like that feeling of self-consciousness. Even when you think no one's watching, you're still aware of yourself as an object.
As potentially being seen.
So if bad faith is us trying to deny our freedom, the look kind of forces us to confront it. In this really like uncomfortable way.
Exactly. It highlights the tension between wanting to be seen a certain way and also wanting to be free to be ourselves.
So is there any way out of this struggle?
Well, Sartre doesn't offer any easy answers. You know. He believed that conflict and tension are just part of human relationships. But that doesn't mean that we're doomed to this life of like bad faith and alienation, right? Remember, Sartre was all about championing human freedom. He believed that even though we're thrown into a world we didn't create, we still have the power to choose how we respond to it.
Okay, so there's some hope then. But how do we actually do that?
Yeah.
How do we live authentically in a world where like we're constantly being seen and judged?
That's the big question. And it's something that each of us has to figure out for ourselves. But I think Sartre gives us some clues. First, we have to acknowledge our freedom. We have to own the fact that we're not just products of our circumstances, but active participants making choices every day.
So that means taking responsibility for those choices.
Exactly.
Even the tough ones.
Even the tough ones.
No more blaming our parents or our past or our horoscopes.
Exactly. It also means being willing to confront the look head on. You know, without flinching. We can't let the fear of judgment paralyze us. We have to be willing to be seen. Even if it means being vulnerable.
That takes a lot of courage.
It does. It takes courage to be authentic, to embrace our freedom, to live according to our values, even when it's hard. And this connects back to something we talked about earlier, action. For Sartre, action is the way we realize our freedom. It's not enough to just think about our choices. We have to actually make them. Even within the constraints of our situation.
So it's not about ignoring the look or pretending it doesn't exist. It's about engaging with it in a way that affirms our own like agency and responsibility and then taking action based on those choices.
You got it. Sartre's philosophy can be pretty challenging, but it's also incredibly empowering. It reminds us that we're not just these like passive objects in the world, but active subjects who have the power to shape our own lives and relationships.
I love that shift in perspective. It's not about being powerless in the face of these external forces. It's about recognizing the power we do have, even if it's limited. Okay, before we go any further with I want to circle back to something else you mentioned earlier. Sartre's take on Sigmund Freud and the unconscious mind. I know he had some strong opinions about that.
Sartre actually admired Freud's work and his insights into, you know, the human psyche, but he also had some major disagreements with Freud's approach, particularly the concept of the unconscious mind. Sartre felt like this idea of the unconscious actually undermined the whole idea of personal responsibility.
That's interesting. Can you elaborate on that a bit more? Like, why did Sartre object to the idea of the unconscious? Seems like a pretty well-established concept in psychology.
So Sartre felt that Freud's model of the mind, with this division into, you know, the conscious, the preconscious, and the unconscious, ultimately kind of split the subject in two. It created this duality between the liar and the lied to, where, you know, part of us is supposedly aware of something
Yeah.
that another part of us is repressing.
So it's like we're fighting with ourselves.
Yeah.
With one part of our mind trying to hide things from another part.
Yeah, yeah.
But isn't that like kind of how our minds work? Sometimes like we have thoughts and feelings that we're not always.
Right, you're right. Our minds are complex. But Sartre argued that this model didn't really solve the problem of bad faith. It just shifted it to another level. Instead of explaining how like a single consciousness could be both aware and unaware of something, Freud just kind of transferred the paradox to the sensor, right? This hypothetical entity that controls what enters and exits consciousness.
So it's like saying, oh, it's not me who's in bad faith. It's my unconscious mind that's doing it.
Right.
And I could see how that would feel like a cop-out.
Total cop-out. And Sartre saw this as a way of avoiding responsibility for our own choices and actions. He believed that we're always fully conscious of our choices, even if we choose not to acknowledge them.
Right.
And he felt that attributing behaviors to the unconscious was just a way of dodging the weight of our freedom.
So for Sartre, there's no hiding from our choices.
No.
Even the ones we try to like bury deep down. That's a pretty radical idea. It's like saying we can't blame our unconscious mind for our bad behavior. We're always in control.
Yeah.
Even if we don't want to admit it.
That's the core of Sartre's existentialism. We're condemned to be free.
Right.
And that freedom means that we're responsible.
Right.
We can't hide behind the unconscious or any other external force. We are the authors of our own lives.
Right.
And we have to own up to that.
This is making me rethink my whole concept of free will.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, there's something like empowering about it. It's like Sartre is saying we have more agency than we might think.
Absolutely. It can be daunting, but it's also incredibly liberating. If we're truly free, then we have the power to change, to create a more meaningful and authentic existence for ourselves.
Okay. This is a lot to take in. Sartre's philosophy is definitely challenging, but it's also incredibly like thought-provoking.
Yeah.
I feel like he's giving me permission to question the assumptions I make about myself and the world.
Right.
And to create my own meaning and purpose.
Exactly.
Which brings us back to the idea of action.
Yeah.
If we're truly free and responsible for our choices, then what does that mean for like how we should live our lives? What does it mean to act authentically in the face of all this freedom?
That's a great question. And it's something that we're going to explore in more depth as we continue to unpack Sartre's ideas about how to live authentically, how to embrace freedom without being paralyzed by it, and how to navigate the complexities of the look and the struggle for recognition.
Sounds good. So we're back and still deep in the world of Jean-Paul Sartre and his ideas about freedom and responsibility and like living authentically in the face of all that.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff.
It is. And before we went to the break, we were talking about how Sartre saw action as like the key to making our freedom like real. So how do we actually do that?
Yeah, it's one thing to talk about freedom, but it's a whole other thing to live it. Sartre knew that, and he really believed that it was through action that we define ourselves. He argued that our choices, the things we do, are ultimately more important than our thoughts, our feelings, or even our intentions.
So it's not enough to just like sit around and contemplate our existence.
Exactly. We got to get out there and do something.
Okay, so even choosing like what to have for breakfast or what to wear is an act of
in a way,
self-creation.
Every choice we make, no matter how small, is an opportunity to express our freedom and shape who we're becoming.
I'm starting to see how this like connects back to the look, right? And the struggle for recognition. If we're constantly creating ourselves through our actions, then the way other people see us is also like
that's a really insightful connection.
Okay.
The look isn't static. It's dynamic.
Okay.
It's influenced by our actions, our choices, and how we present ourselves to the world. And just as we're trying to shape how others see us, they're also trying to shape how we see ourselves.
It's like this like intricate dance where we're all like
Yeah, a very philosophical dance.
actors and audience members
Right.
at the same time.
Like, this is where Sartre's emphasis on action becomes so important.
Okay.
By acting authentically, by making choices that align with our values and who we truly want to be, we can start to break free from the constraints of the look and create this more genuine sense of self.
Okay, so it's about like taking ownership
Yeah.
of our choices and our actions and not letting ourselves be defined by how other people perceive us.
Exactly.
Which, I mean, that takes like a lot of courage, especially in a world that can feel so judgmental.
It takes courage to be vulnerable, to step outside of the roles and expectations that society tries to impose on us.
Right.
But for Sartre, this was the only way to live a truly authentic life.
It's like we have to like embrace the uncertainty and the discomfort that comes with freedom in order to really experience like what it means to be fully alive.
You got it. Sartre believed that freedom wasn't about comfort or security. It was about embracing the unknown and taking responsibility for shaping our own destinies. It's about choosing to act, even when it's difficult, even when we're afraid.
This has been such an incredible journey. Sartre's ideas are so challenging, but they're also like so incredibly inspiring. He reminds us that we have like way more power and agency than we often realize.
I'm so glad you feel that way. Sartre's philosophy is a powerful tool for self-discovery and for understanding, the complexities of human existence.
I have a feeling I'll be wrestling with these ideas for a long time. So as we wrap up our deep dive into being and nothingness, what's the one key takeaway you hope our listener walks away with?
I hope you'll remember that freedom isn't something that's given to us. It's something that we create through our choices and our actions. And while that freedom might feel, daunting at times, it's also the source of our greatest potential.
That's a beautiful thought to end on. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We hope you've enjoyed exploring the world of Jean-Paul Sartre. Until next time, keep questioning, keep choosing, and keep creating yourselves.